Welcome back to the Bus Driver Photographer. This is going to be a podcast where I, your Brighton Hove bus driver, give you a peek into my world. Today I want to talk about something that's bubbling up, not just as a what if anymore, but as a real direction for the bus industry. The push towards greater public control, or what some are calling a kind of re-nationalisation by a lot of drivers in the industry, or a lot of people in the industry. What would that actually mean for us drivers and for you, the passengers, right here in Brighton and Hove? You know, for decades, bus services in the UK outside of London have largely been run by private companies since deregulation in the 1980s. Here in Brighton, Brighton Hove Buses has been that private company, and they've generally built up a pretty good reputation for frequency, for a modern fleet, including our growing number of electric buses, and for having drivers like me who generally know their patch. We're part of the fabric of the city, but the government's strategy, especially since the Bus Service Act of 2017, has been to give local authorities more power. Powers like fundraising, powers like franchising. You see places like Greater Manchester already moving towards this, and others are looking at it as well. So while it might not be central government owning every single bus, it's about councils, local public bodies having much more say over routes, fares, and service levels. From my seat, that feels like a big step towards public control. So, what are the potential positives of this shift? The big one for us drivers has to be job security and stability. When you're part of a private company, there's always that underlying pressure for profit. Routes might be cut if they're not profitable enough. Service can be reduced. With local authority control, you'd hope for a more stable environment where the focus is firmly on providing public services first, rather than just maximizing shareholder profits. That leads me into another point: investment. If local councils or combined authorities are in charge, it could mean more consistent public funding for new buses, not just electric, but potentially hydrogen or whatever is the next big thing, without having to jump through commercial hoops. Better depots, better infrastructure, maybe even improved facilities for us drivers at the end of the shifts. And there's always the hope for improved wages, pensions, and working conditions, potentially. Standardizing things across a region that would be a huge relief for many of us. Then there's the idea of integrated, cohesive services. If local services oversee everything, you could see much more joined up thinking between bus services and other public transports, like trains or trams, not trams in Brighton and Hove, making public transport more accessible for everyone. And if people are using the buses more because they're better, that could mean less traffic for me to battle through, and generally happier passengers. But there's always a but, isn't there? Always a but. There are definitely concerns. My biggest worry, and I think many of my colleagues would agree, is bureaucracy and slower decision making, even at a local council level. Big organisations can sometimes be less agile. Would decision making become bogged down in committees and red tape? Could the loss of unique local flexibility that I think our current operator here in Brighton has, being able to respond quickly to local needs? Then there's the question of funding gaps. While the idea is public funding, that money still has to come from somewhere, either central government grants, which can be inconsistent, or local council budgets, which are often stretched to breaking point. What happens if the funding isn't always there? I'd also be thinking about the transition period itself. moving from privately run system to a publicly controlled one with thousands of employees potentially transferring new contracts, new ways of working. That's a massive undertaking. There will be disruption, uncertainty, and it could be a bumpy ride for a while. And finally, for us drivers, there's the uncertainty about terms and conditions. If we transfer from a private company to a new publicly controlled entity, what happens to our existing contracts, our holidays, our pay scales? The hope is for improvement, but change always brings a bit of anxiety. On a day to day level, how would this shift actually change things for me? Would our uniform change? Would the rosters change, become more rigid or more flexible? Would dealing with repairs and maintenance be faster or slower? I mean, they'd struggle to be slower. These are practical things that can make a real difference to our working lives. Overall, it's a really complex issue and it's happening right now in parts of the country. And we're seeing it within Sussex as well. The council are having more of a say in what we're doing, the fares, the routes, the running, and things like that. There's a part of me that longs for the stability and the community focused investment that greater public control could bring. But there's another part that worries about losing the agility and perhaps some of the established expertise we have with current operators. And as much as drivers complain about management, it's not just bus drivers. Every employee complains about the management within the bus industry. As and when the council do take over, the local authorities do take over, they're going to need the people that have been running bus services. They're going to need people that know how to operate a bus company. It's certainly a lot to ponder. While I'm navigating those tricky Brighton roads, what do you think with this shift towards more public control for bus services? Are you optimistic or concerned? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.